Hello there, welcome back to Language Professora. In this video, we are still looking at our grade 7 Jamaican literature text, and we are now going into chapter 3, On the Road. Just a heads up, it is definitely shorter than chapter 2, so it should be a little bit easier to follow. Let's see what's happening with Frank and his cronies right now. So we have it broken down into two segments for this one, right? First part of the plot is on the way to the post office. What happens is, based on how the rural area is set up, not every district or every village or every community has all the amenities that it needs. And so in this case, this community, I'm not going to give the name just yet because we're going to see that in a bit. They have to go to a neighboring district to collect their mail. So what is happening here is Teacher Days. Every Friday, he sends 2 students to the neighboring district to collect the mail, to send out letters, etc., etc. So they open this chapter with that sort of a premise being set. Right? Now there is something that, remember in the last video we spoke about the things that give some sort of clue to the era in which the story is taking place. This section here, he gives them a small wage. I want you to go and look at the kind of money that was used, and that gives you a clue as to the era in which this story is set. I'm going to ask a question at the end of the video regarding this, so pay attention. In this particular event, on this particular day, he chooses to send Nathan and Daniel. By now we should know that these are 2 of Frank's friends. He advises them to hurry and to not get into any trouble on the road. Now, this is a bit of foreshadowing, right? Where the instruction is given regarding something that is actually going to happen down the road. When the boys leave the school, they run into Frank, and the 3 boys walk together and go on their merry way to get that task done. On the way, they briefly encounter King Myrodas. We see a little bit of a silent encounter between Frank and King Myrodas. If you recall what happened at the end of chapter 2 between them, I won't tell you, you go read it for yourself. You know that's my tagline by now, go read it for yourself. But there's a bit of an encounter that they had, and as a result, Frank was a little bit hesitant about encountering him again. When they are about a mile away from their destination, they come across 3 boys. These are boys that they do not know. The boys begin to bully them. You know, boys will be boys, children will be children. They begin to bully them, and this is where our first major conflict develops. They get into a fight. The boys actually beat them up and leave them, laughing, being victorious in their conflict being not conflict being something, but being victorious in the fact that they beat up these other boys, these strange boys. But of course, Mr. Frank is not going to take that, right? So they could have just gone to the post office and gone back to where they're coming from. But no, Frank decides that they're going to get revenge, and that introduces more conflict. So the plan is that they're going to ambush the bullies while they're on their way back from where they went, as in where the bullies went. They're going to ambush them on their way back from there. So Frank, Daniel, and Nathan gather in the bushes with some stones, and suspense is building with the reader, because of course you should be anticipating what is going to happen. Are they going to stone them? Are they going to get into another fight? What is going to happen here? Of course, they stone them, and that's the climax of this particular section here. The bullies run away, and that is the resolution right there. Other elements in this section, we have our characters being teacher days, Nathan, Daniel, Frank, and the bullies. Notice that I list the characters in the order in which they appear in the story. That makes it a little bit easier for you to identify the chain of events and who is impacting what event at what point. Our setting is a countryside. It's a Friday morning, and we're told that they are leaving from Jimmy Peace. So here we now know the name of the community that Frank lives in, Jimmy Peace, and they're heading to Shady Vale. There's a third place, but we will get to that in the other part. The themes are friendship, of course, Frank and his friends, and childhood behavior. We see that theme popping up quite a bit. And in this instance, the childhood behavior that we are seeing is bullying. Let's take a look at part 2. So remember, at the end of part 1, they eventually went on their way. So Frank and his friends arrive at the post office. They get their business done. The postmistress does notice that they don't look too right, but she doesn't say anything much about it. They go and they get their bullas from Willie Chen, which is one of the things that Nathan and Daniel made a point of pointing out, that, you know, when they get the chance to go to the post office, that's one of the treats, the highlights of their journey, to stop and get bullas with the money that they got from the teacher. So they get their bullas. But now on the way back, they're thinking and they're saying, well, guess what's going to happen now? We have to pass back through that area where we stoned those boys. What are we going to do? We can't walk back there, so they contemplate which way to take. They decided that they were going to take the canal, but by the time they got to the canal, back up. They were contemplating if they should take the canal. And they said to themselves that they would decide if they would take it when they got there. The problem with the canal route is it is longer and it's a little bit more rough in terms of the terrain. So more than likely they have to maybe walk through more bushes if they decided to take the route of the canal. So when they got to the canal, there is a difference of opinion. Frank wants to just walk on the road and whatever happens, happens. But the other boys want to go by the canal. How is this conflict going to be solved? A solution comes when they hear a truck and realize that it is Mr. Black. What was Mr. Black collecting? He was either on his way to somewhere or from somewhere, but there's a particular crop that was involved. What was that crop? Talk to me. So they hop onto the truck and they soon get to Fairhill. That's the third place that I had mentioned earlier, that we were going to come up on a third place. This was where they had met the bullies originally. Now, when they get to Fairhill, they look ahead and they see that there's a crowd in the village square, and the crowd is armed with sticks and stones. So can you imagine if Mr. Black had not come along and they had listened to Frank and decided to walk on the road, they would have walked into this chaos and they would have been the target for the attack. So they see this crowd and suspense begins to build, because they're wondering if Mr. Black is going to stop or not, because the crowd is shouting to him to stop and they don't want him to stop because they know they're the target. So anyway, Mr. Black drives on. The boys are relieved that they're leaving the crowd behind, but the crowd is running behind the truck, right? But they're leaving them behind and they're happy about that. However, this feeling of relief doesn't last long, because the truck soon stops. Now put yourself in their place. You just left your attackers behind because you're driving in a vehicle, but the vehicle that you're in now stops. What happens if the attackers didn't stop running? They will eventually catch up to the truck. What is going to happen? So we have some suspense coming in. Mr. Black goes into the bush and he spends quite a long time. The longer they spend not moving, is the more likely it is that the villagers will catch up to them. So the suspense is building. They look and they see 5 villagers coming down the road. More suspense. Mr. Black is not back yet. They see the villagers coming. And these are country people. They are not walking slow. Okay? They're walking very fast. When they see the truck, the villagers that is, when they see the truck, they begin to shout. Mr. Black jumps out of the bush, pretty scared, and jumps into the truck. I won't say what was going on with his clothing when he jumped out of the bush, okay? We will not discuss that, but you know what happened, right? He jumps into the truck and he starts to drive, and the villagers begin to run after it. More suspense. 2 of them, it says 2 of the boys, so I'm assuming it's maybe 2 of the bullies, or it could be 2 other boys managed to jump onto the truck, and you have a climax here because their attackers have now caught up to them. But Frank, thinking quickly as per usual, grabs a stick and he hits their hand with the stick, and they fall off the truck. They get back to the school with no further incident. One of the boys, either Nathan or Daniel, tell me in the comments which one it was that was able to go into the school with the letters while the other had to go home because of the nature of his injuries. Also, I did not include it in this because I wanted you to be the one to tell me. There is a little conversation that takes place at the end of the chapter. I want you to tell me who are the persons having the conversation and what is the moral that they came up with coming out of that conversation. So the other elements of this second part, we have our characters, Frank, Nathan, Daniel, the postmistress, Willie Chen, Mr. Black, and the villagers. I will not include the boys who jumped onto the truck because they would be a part of the villagers. The setting here, so we started at Shady Vale where the post office is, driving through Fair Hill where the bullies were and where the attempted ambush was, and Jimmy Peace is their destination, which is where they're going back to in terms of home. And the theme, we have friendship, of course, we have revenge, and we have consequences for actions. I want you to answer these questions. Think about it. What comments do you have about the relationship that Frank has with his friends, though he has dropped out of school? Talk to me about what you think the relationship between or among the boys are like, even though they're no longer in the same situation where they're all in school. Tell me about that. And also, there's a theme of consequences for actions coming out in the story. I would like you to itemize some of the instances where you see this playing out and who are the characters that bring this theme out. As usual, happy reading!